Have you ever witnessed a moment that changed everything? He's lying. The words didn't come from an adult. They came from a little girl, 10-year-old Maya Johnson, standing at the back of Courtroom 9A in Charlotte, North Carolina. Her voice cracked with fear, but it was clear. She didn't point to her mother. She didn't point to a lawyer. She pointed straight at the man in uniform, Officer Briggs, on the witness stand. If that moment moved you as much as it moved us, don't let it end here. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We want to hear your voice. And if you believe in stories that speak truth to power, give this video a like and hit subscribe. More stories like this are waiting to be told, and you won't want to miss them. A gasp rippled through the courtroom like thunder through a church. The judge, Honorable Harvey Kent, a white-haired man with deep-set eyes and a reputation for efficiency, raised a skeptical brow. "Order in the court," he called firmly. "Miss, what did you say?" Maya hesitated. She clutched the worn strap of her school bag, her small fingers trembling, her eyes flicked to her mother, Angela Johnson, seated at the defense table, still in her cleaning uniform, hands clenched, eyes wide with alarm. "I said, he's not telling the truth," Maya repeated. Louder now, more steady. Angela's mouth moved without sound, desperation, fear, and disbelief all tangled on her tongue. "Maya, please sit down," she whispered. But it was too late. Angela wasn't supposed to be here, at least not as a defendant. She worked the graveyard shift at a local high-rise downtown, mopping marble floors while the city slept. That night, as she walked to the bus stop after clocking out, she saw flashing blue lights. A young black teenager had been pulled over. Officer Briggs stood outside the car, voice raised, posture aggressive. The boy looked no older than 16. Angela, acting on instinct, stepped closer. She didn't yell. She didn't push. She simply asked, "Is he okay? Do you need a witness?" According to Briggs, that was interference with a lawful stop. Within seconds, Angela was cuffed and charged with obstruction and resisting arrest. But Mia knew what really happened. She had seen it. Because when her mom didn't come home that night, Maya checked the app her mom installed for safety and emergency video upload feature. Angela had left her phone in the mop bucket, and it had caught everything. The shouting, the violence, Briggs yanking the teenager from the car without cause. And when Angela stepped forward, he shoved her hard face first into the pavement. Maya had saved the video. She uploaded it to the cloud. But the next morning when she tried to show it to her aunt, the file was gone, deleted. The courtroom silence was broken by the voice of the defense attorney, Mr. Tom Willis, a lanky, graying man who'd lost more motions than he'd won this week. "Your Honor," he said, "if I may request that the young witness be allowed to speak." The prosecutor was already rising. "Objection. This child was not on the witness list. This is irregular." "We're already in irregular territory," Judge Kent cut in, narrowing his eyes. "Let the girl speak." Maya approached the stand, her braids swaying slightly, her school shoes squeaked against the polished wood floor. A bailiff handed her a Bible. She placed her hand on it. Voice low but sure, "I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth." "Now," said the judge gently, "tell us what you know." Maya sat upright, her legs barely touching the edge of the seat. "The night my mom was arrested, she was just getting off work. She saw a boy being yelled at by the police. She didn't fight. She asked if she could help, that's all. She had her phone in the bucket. It recorded everything. I saw it, but then it disappeared." "Did anyone else see the video?" the judge asked. "Maya, I showed it to my aunt. But the next day, it was gone." Tom Willis leaned forward. "Do you still have access to your mother's account?" "Yes," Maya replied. "I emailed it to myself before it disappeared. I think it's still in my drafts." The courtroom buzzed with hushed voices. But that wasn't the only surprise of the day. Later that afternoon, a woman in a beige cardigan and a courthouse ID badge stepped quietly into the courtroom. Her name was Evelyn Sharp, a longtime court clerk with silver curls and a cautious smile. She waited until the break, then approached Mr. Willis with a sealed folder. Inside were internal reports archived, documents stamped confidential. They were linked to Officer Briggs. At least 3 citizen complaints for excessive force. One included a nearly identical arrest from 2 years ago. Charges dropped. Video gone. Records sealed. We weren't supposed to talk about it, Evelyn said softly, eyes glancing around. But this girl, that child just told the truth the system's been trying to bury. The judge reconvened. Tom Willis requested a delay. Evelyn's folder was submitted into evidence, and Maya, now sitting next to her mother, looked up, her eyes still full of worry, but no longer alone. That day, a 10-year-old girl didn't just speak out. She struck a crack in the wall. A wall of silence built by power, fear, and forgotten names. And through that crack, a little light began to shine. If Maya's courage moved you, hit like to support truth, no matter who speaks it, and drop a comment telling us where you're tuning in from. You never know, someone down the street might be listening to this story, just like you. The court reconvened after a short recess. The mood had changed. No longer routine, no longer dull. Something had shifted. In the corner, reporters whispered over notepads. Behind the benches, older men and women, many of them with graying hair and thick glasses, sat straighter now, listening. Some of them had seen too many trials like this. Too many mothers in uniforms. Too many officers in polished boots. Judge Kent cleared his throat. Court is back in session. Mr. Willis, you may proceed. Tom Willis rose slowly. The sealed folder from Clerk Evelyn Sharp still in his hands. He adjusted his tie, not out of vanity, but to buy a second more of clarity. His case had been circling the drain for days. Now, a 10-year-old had thrown him a lifeline. Your Honor, I would like to enter into the record new material evidence that directly relates to the conduct of the arresting officer, Briggs. In addition, the defense has located a recovered video file relevant to the arrest of my client, Miss Angela Johnson. The prosecutor, a well-groomed man named Peter Monroe, scoffed. Recovered from where? Your Honor, if we're taking cloud accounts and mystery files from children as admissible, Judge Kent raised a hand. Mr. Monroe, you'll get your turn. But for now, let's see what the defense has. Tom opened his laptop, connected it to the courtroom projector, and clicked on a video file titled AngelaCamBackup.mov. The screen above flickered to life. First, a shaky image, blurry streetlights, a shadowed parking lot. Then, the sound, a teenager's frightened voice. I didn't do anything, man. A commanding bark followed. Get out the car. Hands where I can see him. The camera, buried among Angela's cleaning supplies, caught the frame in patches. Briggs's silhouette appeared, aggressive posture, hand gripping the boy's collar. The boy was maybe 17, thin, wide-eyed, stammering. Briggs shoved him against the hood. The boy whimpered. Angela's voice cut in, calm but firm. Is everything okay, officer? He's just a kid. Briggs turned. Back away. You interfering? No, I'm just. Before the sentence could finish, the image jostled violently. Angela had been grabbed. The next sound was a thud, then silence. When the video ended, no one spoke. A deep exhale spread across the gallery, like breath held too long had just been released. Judge Kent's fingers tapped the bench. Mr. Monroe. Monroe stood, clearly rattled. That video could be doctored. No timestamps, no clear identification. Tom cut in. Your Honor, we have metadata and the original cloud sync history from Apple's legal compliance team. The footage was not altered. The judge gave a long nod. Motion to admit the video into evidence is granted. Angela looked at Maya, then took her hand. Her fingers still shook. Monroe attempted to regroup. Even so, that's one incident. My office still maintains that Miss Johnson resisted arrest and impeded an officer. Willis raised the sealed folder. May I proceed with the clerk's submission? Kent motioned him forward. Tom handed over the file. The judge opened it. His brow furrowed deeper with every page. Officer Briggs has 3 sealed complaints, Willis explained. All for excessive force, all involving black defendants. 2 cases where recording devices malfunctioned, 1 ended in an injury. All swept under internal review. The courtroom buzzed again. A woman in the second row murmured, "He did that to my nephew, too." Another man whispered, "They always protect their own." Evelyn Sharp, still seated quietly near the exit, sat rigid. Her career could be on the line, but she had grown tired of watching files disappear, tired of seeing the same names again and again. She had worked in this courthouse for 27 years, and this time she wasn't going to look away. Judge Kent finally looked up. "Briggs, you've been in this courtroom before, but never as the subject of testimony. Do you have anything to say?" Briggs didn't flinch. The woman stepped into an active stop. She was confrontational. She tried to interfere. "I followed procedure." Willis responded evenly. "So, your procedure included destroying a phone?" Briggs stared straight ahead. "I didn't see a phone." Maya shifted in her seat. She leaned into the mic. "He did see it. He took it from my mom. I saw him break it." Briggs turned, eyes narrowing. "Kid, you shouldn't be here." Judge Kent slammed his gavel. "That's enough." For a moment, everything stilled. The court reporter's fingers hovered. Tom looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, we ask for all disciplinary records on Officer Briggs to be unsealed under judicial review. We also request full forensic analysis of his body cam logs for the past 12 months. The judge didn't hesitate. "Granted, and Officer Briggs, you are to surrender your service device and remain available for questioning by internal affairs." Gasps, a few claps. Judge Kent banged the gavel again, reminding everyone this was still a court of law as Briggs was escorted out of the courtroom by 2 bailiffs. Maya leaned into her mother's side. "You did it, baby," Angela whispered. "No, Mama," Maya said softly. "We did it." Out in the hallway, people had already gathered. Older women hugged each other. A local journalist recorded a segment right outside the courthouse steps. Evelyn Sharp walked past them unnoticed, her shoulders straighter than they'd been in years. What Mia had done wasn't just testify. She had cracked a wall that had long stood around Officer Briggs, around people like him. That wall, for the first time, began to shake. And inside that courtroom, amid the smell of paper, wood polish, and justice long delayed, a mother's eyes finally saw hope. If Maya's courage gave you pause today, take a moment to hit like and let her know truth still matters, and share where you're listening from, because voices like hers deserve to echo far beyond one courtroom. The next morning, the courthouse lobby filled earlier than usual. The air buzzed with quiet tension and sharp murmurs. Reporters sipped bad coffee from paper cups while glancing at their notes. Retired teachers, former city workers, and even a group of church deacons from the south side stood in line for the gallery. Something had changed. The people were paying attention. Inside, Maya sat beside her mother on the cold wooden bench, her legs swinging just above the floor. Angela looked more rested, her hair tied back, still in her uniform, but with her name tag removed. She hadn't gone back to work. Too many calls, too many questions, and too many people saying, "We didn't know." But Maya hadn't said much that morning. She clutched the same backpack and stared straight ahead, her mind retracing every frame of the video now etched into memory. The door creaked open. A slender figure in a dark skirt and cardigan stepped inside quietly. Evelyn Sharp didn't look like someone who could rattle the system. She had spent decades doing her job exactly as it was asked, filing, logging, and sealing documents. But after yesterday, she was done pretending paper couldn't bleed. Judge Kent entered, firm and deliberate, and nodded to begin. "Before we proceed," he said, "the court acknowledges the presence of Miss Sharp and thanks her for her courage and cooperation in providing sealed documentation that may prove relevant to this case." Evelyn barely nodded. She didn't need a spotlight, just a clear conscience. Tom Willis stood. "Your Honor, in addition to the recovered footage, we've submitted a motion to unseal the full internal affairs report on Officer Briggs. However, in light of new evidence from court files, we're requesting the court allow examination of a specific incident from 2 years ago involving a Mr. Curtis Holloway. Judge Kent tapped the bench. Proceed. The courtroom monitor blinked to life again. This time, not a video, just documents, complaint summaries, witness statements, timelines, names blacked out, words highlighted. At the center of it, Curtis Holloway, 19 years old at the time, arrested during a routine traffic stop. Allegations of unnecessary force. Complaint dismissed. Body cam malfunctioned. Charges dropped, but no apology. No explanation. The similarities were too strong to ignore. Angela whispered, "That's the boy who used to bag groceries at Dawson's Market." Maya looked up. "He got arrested, too." "Worse," Angela said, "he disappeared after." As the court studied the documents, a familiar voice rose from the doorway. "He didn't disappear." All heads turned. A tall young man stepped into the light, broad-shouldered, nervous. He wore jeans and a faded hoodie. Under one arm, a folder. In the other hand, a walking cane. "I'm Curtis Holloway," he said, voice shaking. "And Officer Briggs didn't just hurt me. He broke my leg. He told me if I filed anything again, they'd find drugs in my locker, so I moved away. I didn't think anyone would believe me." A long silence. Then Tom Willis turned slowly to the judge. "Your Honor, I believe we're no longer arguing whether misconduct occurred. We're arguing how far it went and who helped cover it." Monroe, the prosecutor, shifted uncomfortably. "We were not informed of this witness." Judge Kent waved it off. "Doesn't mean the testimony isn't relevant. Mr. Holloway, please take the stand." Curtis moved slowly, favoring one leg. As he settled in, Maya looked at him as if he were someone from a storybook. Not a superhero. Not exactly, but something close. Curtis recounted everything. How he was pulled over for a broken tail light. How Briggs escalated immediately. How his questions turned to orders and orders to violence. "He slammed me to the ground," Curtis said, then said, "Who's going to believe you, boy?" The courtroom didn't breathe. When he finished, Angela reached for Maya's hand. Across the aisle, Evelyn closed her eyes. Judge Kent turned to the prosecutor. "Mr. Monroe, does the state wish to continue pressing charges against Miss Johnson in light of this testimony and previous evidence?" Monroe stood, paused, then let out a resigned sigh. "The state withdraws all charges." The words didn't fall like a hammer. They fell like a curtain, revealing what had always been true, but hidden behind protocol and red tape. Angela covered her mouth, tears welling. Mia wrapped her arms around her mother's waist. People in the gallery clapped, some softly, others louder. Curtis remained on the stand, nodding once as if to say, "Finally." But Judge Kent wasn't finished. "Before we adjourn," he said, "this court is recommending the initiation of a full review of Officer Briggs's conduct and any cases under his supervision for the last 5 years. Furthermore, we are requesting oversight from the Department of Justice regarding the filing and management of sealed complaints within this district." Angela stood slowly, helping Maya to her feet. She didn't say anything as she walked out. No speech, no victory pose, just a mother walking into the sun with her daughter, both a little lighter. Both knowing the fight wasn't over, but that silence had lost today. Outside the courthouse, a local news crew approached. Curtis gave one short interview. Evelyn declined comment. Tom Willis simply said, "Sometimes justice doesn't come with a bang. Sometimes it walks out of court holding a little girl's hand." That night, Maya sat at the kitchen table, the old family radio humming softly in the background. Her aunt cooked gumbo on the stove. Angela rested in the living room, finally out of her uniform. Maya scribbled in her notebook, a habit she'd started after watching a PBS documentary in school. At the top of the page, she wrote, "The day the janitor told the truth and the system had to listen." If that moment stirred something in you, hit like to show support for Maya and others like her, and drop a comment telling us where you're listening from. because maybe, just maybe, someone nearby is ready to listen too. 3 days after the charges were dropped, the Johnson household still hadn't found peace. Relief had come, yes, but with it a new noise. Phones ringing, letters arriving, strangers knocking to ask if Angela would speak at their church, their school board, their protest. Maya found herself answering questions she didn't understand yet. Reporters wanted sound bites. Neighbors brought over pies they hadn't shared in years. And yet, in the middle of it all, there was one sound Maya kept coming back to. Silence. Not the silence of fear or helplessness, but the silence that came after truth had been spoken aloud. A quietness so profound it hummed beneath every footstep. That silence was sacred now. Angela stood at the sink washing dishes, her movements slower than usual. The lines on her face had deepened from weeks of stress, but there was a softness returning to her shoulders. "Maya," she said gently, "baby, are you okay?" Maya looked up from the kitchen table where she was sketching in her notebook. She'd been drawing something new, a courthouse, but not like the one she sat in last week. This one had open doors and sunshine spilling out from the entrance. "I'm okay," Maya answered. "But why is everyone acting like it's over? Officer Briggs isn't even in jail." Angela set a glass down. "Because people like things that feel finished, baby. They want a headline that says, 'Justice served,' so they can move on." "But it wasn't served," Maya replied, brow furrowed. "They just stopped hurting us." Angela didn't answer. She didn't have to. That evening, Maya and her mother visited Evelyn Sharp. The clerk's modest house sat on the edge of town, its porch wrapped in string lights that flickered weakly against the dusk. Evelyn had invited them for tea and a little bit of peace, as she called it. Inside, photos lined the walls, wedding portraits, graduation gowns, snapshots of Evelyn in her younger days, sitting behind a massive desk covered in files. She poured warm chamomile tea into chipped porcelain cups and gestured for them to sit. "I'm retiring," Evelyn said simply. Angela blinked. "Is that because of what happened?" Evelyn gave a small smile. "No, I should have done it last year, but I wanted to make sure someone listened before I left." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a thin manila folder. "This is the real reason I asked you here." Angela hesitated before opening it. Inside were copies of 4 complaints, different names, different cases, but all with a familiar signature at the bottom. Darnell Briggs. "I started keeping copies," Evelyn confessed. "Couldn't sleep at night. Every time someone came in looking scared and walked out with silence, I just kept them in case someone ever asked." Angela exhaled slowly. "Why now?" "Because your daughter made people look," Evelyn replied. "And I wasn't going to let them turn away again." Maya looked down at the papers. One woman had a broken wrist. Another had her child taken by child services after false claims. All dismissed. All filed away. "I want to help," Maya said suddenly. "I want to show people, make them remember." Evelyn leaned back, eyes narrowing with curiosity. "You want to tell stories, little one?" "Not stories," Maya said. "Truth." A week later, they held the first meeting in the basement of Mount Olive Community Church. Folding chairs, a microphone, a thermos of coffee. Not a press conference, not a protest, just voices. Curtis Holloway came. So did Mrs. Langston, a retired teacher whose son had filed a complaint against Briggs in 2016. Evelyn read aloud parts of the dismissed reports, letting them breathe in the air they'd been denied. And then slowly, other people stood up. It wasn't about just Briggs anymore. It was about a system that asked people like Angela to mop its floors but punished her when she dared to raise her head. It was about clerks who were told to file, not to feel. About mothers who tucked in their children with the worry that truth alone wouldn't protect them. By the third meeting, a name had been given. The Quiet Circle. It grew week by week. A retired police officer asked to speak. A pastor donated printing supplies. A librarian offered space for archiving documents. They weren't radicals. They weren't loud, but they were steady. Maya designed a flyer with crayons and printer paper. A drawing of a young girl holding a tape recorder with the words, "Let the truth speak. We'll listen." She hung one at the library. Another at the grocery store bulletin board below an ad for piano lessons. And people did listen. Angela still worked nights, but now she was often asked to share her experience at local colleges. Not because she was extraordinary, but because she had survived and chose to stay visible. One evening, after a town hall discussion, an elderly man in a veteran's cap approached Maya. "You remind me of someone," he said. "My sister. She stood up to a sheriff once in Alabama, 1963. They called her a troublemaker. Now they call her brave. Funny how that works." Maya didn't know what to say, so she smiled. That night, as they sat by the radio again, same kitchen, same worn tile floor, Angela turned the dial to the public station. A host's voice filled the room. "Tonight, we're sharing a story from Charlotte, North Carolina, where a young girl helped uncover a pattern of misconduct by a local police officer. But this isn't a story about villains and heroes. It's a story about what happens when someone refuses to stay silent." Maya didn't blink. She knew the story. She had lived it. And now the world was hearing it, too. If that broadcast made you stop and think, hit like to help carry Mia's voice farther, and drop a comment. Tell us where you're listening from, because sometimes the echo of truth just needs a place to land. The morning air outside Charlotte's municipal building was unusually sharp for spring, the kind of breeze that made people pull their jackets tighter and walk a little faster. But inside, in a narrow hallway lined with plaques and framed city council resolutions, Renee Alvarez wasn't moving quickly. She was stalling. A junior officer assigned to administrative duty since her shoulder injury on patrol last year, Renee hadn't expected to become part of anything resembling a scandal. She had wanted out of the front lines, away from the noise, and into something predictable. But then came the Johnson case and, more specifically, Maya Johnson. She remembered the moment she saw the court transcript. A child, 10 years old, pointing at a decorated officer and saying the words, "He's lying." It hadn't just caught her attention. It had shaken something in her. She'd known Briggs, worked with him once during training. His swagger had always made her uneasy. But that wasn't enough to act. Until now. Renee entered the records department, a dimly lit space that smelled like printer ink and forgotten coffee. She flashed her badge. "I need to review internal camera logs from the 12th precinct past 6 months and incident file backups." The clerk, a young man barely out of college, blinked. "Ma'am, that's restricted unless it's IIA or a direct order." She handed over a signed affidavit from Judge Kent. "Now it's not." In less than an hour, she sat at a terminal scrolling through lines of digital data. Timestamps, login IDs, system pings. Most of it was routine, mundane, the kind of bureaucratic debris that hid rot in plain sight. But then she found something. On the night Angela Johnson was arrested, Officer Briggs had logged into the precinct's secure network for exactly 92 seconds. During that window, he accessed a backup deletion protocol meant for emergency evidence suppression, used only when sensitive undercover footage might compromise operations. The action was flagged but never followed up. Renee stared at the screen. There it was, a digital fingerprint, not just negligence, intent. She leaned back, heart racing. This wasn't just one bad officer making impulsive choices. It was a system giving him tools, trusting he wouldn't be caught, and never asking questions when he used them. By that afternoon, she stood outside a modest brick house in West Charlotte. Her knuckles hovered over the door before she knocked. A woman answered, dark hair pulled back, eyes cautious. "Mrs. Holloway," Renee asked, "I'm Officer Alvarez. May I speak with Curtis?" Within minutes, they sat in the living room. Curtis, still walking with a slight limp, studied her with suspicion. She didn't blame him. "I found something," Renee said. "Something I think you need to see." She opened her laptop and pulled up the log file. She explained how Briggs had used a deletion tool, how it likely affected not just Angela Johnson's footage, but Curtis's 2 years prior. Curtis leaned forward. "They said it malfunctioned. Said it just stopped working." They lied, Renee said, her voice low. They erased you. His jaw tightened. Why now? Why you? I don't know, she admitted. Maybe because Maya said something I didn't have the courage to. And maybe because no one's ever going to fix this unless someone on the inside does more than just whisper. Curtis said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, so what happens now? Now. That word felt heavier than it should have. Renee wasn't sure, but she knew one thing. Truth was no longer buried. It was stirring. Meanwhile, Maya was sitting in the back of Mount Olive Church again, doodling in her notebook while her mom spoke to a small group. It had grown now, nearly 50 people, including 2 former public defenders, 3 school teachers, and a retired judge. Angela stood at the front with a mix of poise and hesitation. I didn't go looking for this. I just wanted to help a kid on the street, but what I've learned is that silence helps the wrong people stay in power. And sometimes the only thing that breaks that silence is someone small making a sound big enough to be heard. The room was quiet for a long moment. Then an older woman near the front stood. My son was arrested last year. Same street, same time of night. By Briggs. Another voice added, my nephew too. No charges stuck, but he hasn't been the same since. They were building something now, thread by thread, a map of stories that didn't start with Maya, but had been waiting for her spark. Back at the precinct, Renee submitted her findings to Internal Affairs directly, and with a paper trail to match, she sent a copy to Judge Kent, another to the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. It was the first time in her career she felt afraid of her own badge, but it was also the first time she felt worthy of wearing it. Late that night, Angela tucked Maya into bed. The house was finally quiet. The world outside was still uncertain, but the space between them was peaceful. You okay, sugar? Angela asked. Maya nodded. I'm just thinking about what that little folder Miss Evelyn gave us. About the names inside. They're like ghosts, aren't they? All the people nobody listened to. Angela sat on the edge of the bed. Maybe, but they're not ghosts anymore. They're voices, and now we're listening. Maya smiled faintly. Can I draw them? Angela looked at her daughter, heart full. Draw every one of them, baby. The notebook stayed open that night. A pencil left across the page. And in the soft radio static playing from the kitchen, a host's voice murmured, tonight's story comes from Charlotte, where a child's courage opened the door to questions long overdue. We're not finished yet, but something's been found, and something else, something stronger, is being built. If that spark gave you hope, like this post to keep the light moving, and share where you're listening from, because the truth isn't quiet anymore, and someone near you might just be ready to speak. The email landed in Judge Kent's inbox at 7:43 a.m. It came from the Department of Justice, subject, Preliminary Federal Inquiry, Officer Darnell Briggs. The attachment was marked confidential in bold red letters. He didn't need coffee to wake up that morning. As he opened the file, the weight of the last 3 weeks returned to his chest. The DOJ report was brief but pointed. Multiple complaints tied to Briggs, alarming deletion patterns in precinct digital archives, and gaps in disciplinary follow-through stretching back nearly a decade. Most damning was the final paragraph. Given community concern and pattern indicators, the DOJ is authorizing an independent audit of Charlotte's 12th precinct and recommending temporary suspension of Officer Briggs pending full investigation. Judge Kent exhaled slowly. The system had finally looked up. Across town, Angela was tying her work shoes, preparing for her first full shift back. She hadn't returned to the high-rise since the night of her arrest. The cleaning staff had covered her hours out of loyalty, but it wasn't the same. Her supervisor left a note that read, "Glad to have you back, Miss Johnson. Your mop's been waiting." Maya stood at the kitchen table, still in pajamas, her school bag at her feet. She watched her mother quietly. "Are you sure it's safe to go back?" Maya asked. Angela smiled, though it didn't fully reach her eyes. "I'm sure it's necessary." Maya nodded slowly. "I finished the drawings, the ones you said I should make." Angela bent down and kissed her forehead. You keep telling the truth your way, baby. At school that day, Maya approached Miss Callahan, her 5th grade teacher. During free period, she handed her the sketchbook, its pages filled with careful drawings, people of different sizes, shades, uniforms, and expressions, each with a name. Some carried wounds, others stories. Miss Callahan flipped through it slowly. Her eyes paused at the page that read, "The day I watched justice try to run away." "Maya," she whispered, "this is powerful." "It's not finished," Mia said. "Because the story isn't." Later that week, the Charlotte Observer ran a feature titled "The Clerk, the Janitor, and the Girl: How Truth Traveled Up the Steps of Justice." The article went viral in the city. It spoke of Evelyn's files, Angela's courage, and Mia's honesty. It didn't mention heroism, just persistence. It showed how systems bend and how people push back. The article reached Curtis Holloway, who'd begun physical therapy again. It reached Mrs. Langston's son, who started attending quiet circle meetings, and it reached Renee Alvarez, who now found her desk stacked with follow-up emails, not from the department, but from citizens, asking questions, demanding answers. Meanwhile, Officer Briggs had gone silent. His union rep issued a brief statement citing unwarranted public scrutiny, but the momentum was no longer his. The city had turned. The badge didn't shine so easily now. One evening, Renee met Evelyn at a diner on the edge of town. They sat in a booth under dim yellow light, sipping weak coffee and staring at a laptop screen. "We're going to need legal support," Evelyn murmured. "And records backup." "If they try to bury it again, they won't," Renee replied. "Too many people are watching." Oh, they opened a new file. Pattern files, Briggs, and related cases. They started logging dates, names, badge numbers. It wasn't just about one officer anymore. It was about how many cracks had been patched instead of fixed. At the next quiet circle meeting, Maya spoke for the first time in front of the group. She stood behind the lectern, barely tall enough to see over it without a booster step. "I used to think stories had to end with the bad guy getting caught," she said. "But Miss Evelyn told me sometimes the real story is how many people show up after, how many keep showing up even when it's hard." The room was still. People nodded. Angela squeezed her daughter's hand. From the back, a man stood. He was thin with deep lines on his face. "My brother," he said slowly, "was arrested 5 years ago by Briggs. We didn't know we could say anything. We didn't think anyone would care." Maya didn't speak. She just stepped down and handed him one of her drawings. A picture of a man standing alone at first, but with a line of people behind him, hand on shoulder, one by one. Outside the church, the wind picked up. Spring was giving way to early summer. The trees lining the sidewalk rustled softly as if whispering their own quiet truths. Angela and Maya walked home under the street lamps. A neighbor called out, "We read the article." "Maya, you're a little firecracker." Mia smiled shyly but kept walking. As they reached their porch, Angela paused. "You know," she said, "I think this started way before us, but I'm glad we're here for it." Maya looked up. "You think it'll change things?" Angela didn't answer right away. She looked out at the street, the silence, the glow of porch lights in the distance. "I think it already has." And inside the Johnson home, Maya opened a fresh page in her sketchbook. At the top, she wrote, Chapter 6, Where the Wall Cracked. If this chapter gave you strength, like this post to keep Maya's message moving, and comment where you're listening from, because the wall's still standing, but now, so are we. It started as a whisper in the church basement. Then a phone call here, a letter there. By the end of the second week of June, it became a wave. The Charlotte City Council chambers had not been this full in years. Folding chairs were brought out from the back. Elderly couples stood along the walls. Teenagers leaned on pillars with folded arms, listening but not speaking yet. Reporters circled like flies to honey, adjusting microphones, scanning faces. Angela Johnson stood near the back with Maya at her side. Evelyn Sharp was already seated toward the front, a small notebook clutched in her lap. She was no longer just a clerk. She was a quiet anchor for a growing storm. The council chair, a tall man with a politician's smile and a teacher's tone, tapped the mic. We are here tonight to listen. The floor is open. At first, no one moved. Then a man with a cane rose slowly. Curtis Holloway. The room hushed. My name is Curtis, he said. 3 years ago, I was assaulted by Officer Briggs during a traffic stop. My body healed slow, my trust slower. But I'm here because a little girl reminded me I wasn't invisible. Applause rippled lightly, respectfully. A woman in her 50s stood. My daughter was arrested under false claims. She lost her scholarship. And it was Briggs again. Another voice and another. Angela listened, her heart swelling and breaking all at once. These weren't speeches. They were openings, wounds pulled gently into the light. Names long hidden, brought to the surface by a 10-year-old girl with a notebook and a mother who refused to sit quietly. Maya clutched Angela's hand. Do you think they hear us now? Angela looked at the crowd. They'd have to be deaf not to. At the end of the meeting, the chair took the mic again, his voice tighter now. The council is formally requesting a citywide review of complaint procedures within the police department and launching a civilian oversight committee by the end of summer. More applause, but this time it was louder. Later that night, Renee Alvarez sat in her car parked outside the precinct where she still worked. She had not gone inside yet. On the passenger seat sat a letter from Internal Affairs. It authorized her full cooperation with federal agents in their inquiry. She was expected to testify. Her phone buzzed with a message from Evelyn. You were right to act. It's not just about Briggs anymore. It never was. Renee stared at the building. Once a place of pride. Now it felt like a house with too many locked rooms. She grabbed her badge, stared at its worn surface, and whispered, no more secrets. The next day, Maya brought her drawings to school. Miss Callahan had turned the back wall of the classroom into a gallery. She titled it Voices That Got Louder. Parents visited during drop-off, stopping to look. One mother wiped a tear away after reading the caption beneath a drawing of a boy in cuffs. Captioned, they said he was angry, but he was just scared. That afternoon, the principal approached Angela. We'd like to feature Maya's artwork at the District Arts Fair next month, and we're considering starting a student-led storytelling initiative, Truth, through pictures or spoken word. Would you be willing to help? Angela blinked. She'd never been asked to teach anything before. She smiled. If it helps kids speak, I'll be there. In the weeks that followed, the quiet circle expanded. What had once been a meeting in a church basement turned into a network. Retired librarians helped create an archive of erased complaints. A local bakery began donating coffee and pastries every Saturday morning. Former public defenders offered pro bono services for anyone whose case involved Briggs or related patterns. People began using their names again. Not just someone I know, but me, my son, my sister. The shame that had once silenced them had been replaced by something stronger. Solidarity. But not everyone welcomed the noise. An anonymous letter was slipped under Angela's apartment door. No return address. Just bold, angry words. Stop lying. You made things worse. Angela read it twice, then threw it in the trash. Maya found it later. She looked up at her mother. Are they right? Angela shook her head. We didn't make things worse, baby. We just stopped pretending they were fine. On the radio that night, a new voice spoke. A young man from Baltimore. I heard about Maya Johnson. We had an officer like that in our city, too. Everyone knew. No one said. But now people are saying. Maya sat near the radio drawing again. This time she sketched a row of houses, each one with an open window and a voice coming out. The caption read, they weren't echoes, they were answers. And outside on the front porch, Angela sat beneath the flickering porch light, watching the street. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew the silence had been broken. And once it was, it could never go back to how it was. If you believe those voices matter, like this story to keep them ringing, and drop a comment. Tell us where you're listening from, because the story is not just here. It's everywhere. People stop whispering and start telling the truth. The news broke on a cloudy Thursday morning. Every major local outlet ran the headline in bold black letters. Federal charges filed against Officer Briggs. More than a dozen victims identified. Angela read the article 3 times over breakfast, holding the newspaper like it might dissolve in her hands. Maya sat across from her, spooning cereal slowly, eyes locked on a grainy photo of Briggs in uniform. This time he wasn't smiling. He wasn't decorated. He was surrounded by federal marshals, hands cuffed behind his back. They finally did it, Mia said. Angela nodded. But it wasn't triumph she felt. It was heaviness, because justice rarely arrived with fireworks. It came slowly, and when it did, it brought a long, hard road of reckoning. That same afternoon, the Department of Justice released a statement. A coordinated investigation had revealed a pattern of misconduct by Briggs that had spanned more than 7 years. Internal reports were ignored. Body cam footage had been tampered with. In at least 4 instances, evidence against him had been sealed prematurely. None of this would have come to light, the DOJ admitted, without the testimony of Angela Johnson, the supporting files from Evelyn Sharp, and the bravery of a child witness. They didn't name Mia directly, but everyone knew. At the community center that evening, the quiet circle held its largest gathering yet. Over 100 people filled the room, chairs scraped against linoleum floors, fans whirred from the ceiling, pushing warm summer air through the space. The lights flickered once, but no one left. Curtis Holloway stood before the crowd. "This isn't about revenge," he said. "It's about repair. Some things will never be undone. But the truth has weight, and now it's finally fallen where it belongs." Applause rolled through the room. Angela stood next. She didn't speak from notes. She just looked out and said, "We kept showing up. Even when they didn't want us to. Even when they told us we were exaggerating or lying or angry, we showed up." And then she turned to Maya, who stood silently beside her. "Come here, baby." Maya hesitated, then walked up, clutching her latest drawing. It was a picture of Briggs in handcuffs, but the real focus was on the people behind him, rows and rows of faces holding signs that read, "We remember. We saw. And we spoke." This is all of you," Maya said into the mic, voice clear. "Even the ones who haven't spoken yet, you're still part of it." That night, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table, sorting files into boxes, not hiding them, preserving them. She'd been contacted by a civil rights archive in Atlanta. They wanted to digitize every record she had saved, every redacted line, every story denied space. She smiled to herself, thinking, let the ghosts have names again. Meanwhile, Renee Alvarez was driving through the edge of the city, heading to meet a task force of civilian oversight leaders. They were setting up the new complaints review process, one with actual teeth this time. It wasn't glamorous. It was spreadsheets, case files, public transparency training, but it was real. And she had promised herself something. If she stayed on the force, it would be to help rebuild, not protect rot. At the end of the week, Mia's class visited the City Museum. In the youth gallery, a new exhibit had been installed. Voices Through Art, Stories That Changed Charlotte. Mia's drawings hung neatly along one wall, framed behind glass. Below them was a plaque, Art by Maya Johnson, age 10. These images reflect the power of witness and the courage of telling the truth, even when it's hard. Students walked past slowly. Some whispered. One girl pointed. Mia didn't say much. She stood with her hands behind her back, taking it all in. Later, Miss Callahan knelt beside her. "How do you feel?" Maya thought for a moment. Like the truth got taller. On Saturday morning, Angela and Maya walked to Dawson's Market. On their way out, a stranger approached, a middle-aged man in a mechanic's uniform. "You're her, right?" he asked, nodding toward Maya, the one from the courthouse. Angela stepped slightly forward, cautious, but Maya nodded. The man pulled out his wallet and showed them a photo. A boy maybe 15. My nephew, he said. He was scared to say anything. Still is, but he saw what y'all did. He said, maybe next time he'd speak up. Angela touched his arm. Tell him the next time he won't be alone. That night, back at home, Angela folded laundry while Maya sat by the window, sketching the scene at the market. The mechanic's face, his nephew's photo, the way her mom stood, just a little taller than usual. Mom, Maya asked, yeah, baby. Do you think we'll have to do all this again with someone else? Angela paused. Probably. That's the hard part. But you know what the good part is? Maya looked up. Next time, Angela said, we won't be starting from silence. And in the soft light of their kitchen, the radio played a story from another city, one now reviewing its own complaints system after community pressure. Maya's name wasn't mentioned, but her echo was there, woven between each sentence. If her voice reached you, help it travel farther, like this story, and tell us where you're listening from, because when the truth gets tall enough, it can't be buried. It has to be heard. By mid-July, the federal investigation had turned into a media spectacle, a reckoning unfurling in real time. Federal agents walked through the 12th Precinct headquarters, reviewing hard drives and interrogating officers. The local news vans camped outside, lights flashing, anchors reporting live. The city felt different, as though its breath was held until Briggs's final fate emerged. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense but purposeful. Angela Johnson sat with Mia beside her, fingers entwined. Evelyn Sharp and Curtis Holloway were in the gallery, flanked by members of the quiet circle. Judge Kent presided with the same steady calm he had shown since the beginning, but even he looked more determined now, as if justice had become personal. The prosecutor from the DOJ, a woman named Lauren Park, began her opening statement. We are here to prove that Officer Darnell Briggs engaged in a pattern of misconduct spanning excessive force, destruction of evidence, suppression of complaints, and a willful violation of civil rights. She paused, scanning the room, and to show that he was not held accountable until now because of a system built to ignore him. A murmur ran through the gallery. The evidence in hand was heavy. Security logs showing deleted backups, sealed complaints, and eyewitness affidavits numbering more than a dozen. The timeline stretched from 2016 to 2025. When Park finished, Tom Willis offered a brief note of gratitude from the defense bench. Miss Johnson is not here to avenge wrongs. She is here for accountability and to make sure no one else is silenced. The judge then swore in the first witness, Officer Renee Alvarez. Under questioning, Alvarez laid out the records trail she discovered. The 92-second deletion protocol on Briggs's night logs, the pattern of internal complaints Evelyn retrieved, and her own moral pivot. At first, I thought it was procedural, she spoke calmly but with authority, but when I realized the pattern, I made a choice to pursue truth, even if it meant risking everything. The courtroom leaned in, hanging on her words. Next came Curtis Holloway. He recounted how Briggs escalated a routine stop into physical violence, smashing his body cam footage. I was told no one would believe me, Curtis said. But someone finally did. He described the long road to healing and why he chose to stand up again, because Maya reminded him that being seen mattered. Then Evelyn Sharp took the stand. A hush settled as she described the documents she'd kept. For sealed complaints that echoed Angela's experience, each with striking similarities. They were always just filed and forgotten, she said. She paused, tears gathering in her eyes. I wasn't afraid of Briggs. I was afraid for the people who came after and found no voice. Finally, Angela was called. She spoke softly at first, but the room leaned closer as she described the night in question, how she only intervened because she believed someone was hurt. Officer Briggs ruined my life for asking if someone was hurt, she said. My daughter paid attention when few adults did. That night, she became our witness. Then came the moment everyone had waited for. Federal Prosecutor Park stood. Officer Briggs, stand. The sound of footsteps echoed as he rose. His once proud uniform folded into a suit. His hands, trembling slightly, gripped the edge of the stand. The judge swore him in. Briggs began. He denied the allegations. I followed procedure. But as Park presented the logs and complaint files, the strain showed. He admitted accessing the deletion protocol. He admitted knowing complaints existed, but denied malicious intent. I was protecting officers' privacy, he said, voice cracking. I thought I was doing right. Park shook her head. Your privacy comes at the cost of truth, at the cost of injuries and hidden lives. She held up a stack of documents. This isn't about intention. This is about harm. Briggs's silence after that was louder than any denial. The jury retired for deliberation. Everyone waited. Outside, news crews gathered. Inside, quiet circle members held their breath. 3 hours later, the jury returned. Angela clutched Maya's hand. Evelyn sat with fists clenched. Curtis looked ahead, unmoving. The verdict was read. Guilty on all charges: civil rights violations, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence. Briggs's head dropped. In the courthouse hush, the judge released a statement recommending maximum sentencing, time served, dismissal from the force, and public apology. Angela exhaled. Mia pressed her hand tighter. When the courtroom emptied, reporters flooded around them. Maya didn't say much, but she squeezed her mother's hand and lifted her head. A local news camera caught the moment. Mother and daughter emerging into the light. Angela spoke into the mic, voice steady. This wasn't just my fight. It was everyone who ever felt unseen. This is for my daughter. Maya looked into the camera and offered a small wave. In the days that followed, press released copies of new policies, complaint procedures made public, regular audits instituted, protections for citizen witnesses, a civil oversight board was formally launched. Evelyn transferred her archives to the Atlanta Civil Rights Project. Curtis joined as a consultant. Renee stayed in the force, assigned to community outreach. Angela became a speaker on citizen rights. And Maya, she continued drawing. Her notebook filled with new pages, images of communities listening, systems breaking, voices rising. Each drawing titled simply Truth. That summer, the quiet circle met outside under oak trees, sharing a potluck dinner. Stories of healing, of hope. Maya wove between tables offering drawings, listening to laughter and tears. The air was warm and full. At dusk, Angela raised a glass of sweet tea. To the wall we cracked, she said. The group echoed cheers. Maya, standing beside her mother, felt the truth she carried grow taller. If this chapter reminded you that truth can win even when silence fights back, please like to amplify Maya's voice, and comment where you're listening from, because every time truth is spoken, someone is listening. Summer and Charlotte had a way of softening even the hardest memories. Cicadas hummed in the trees like background singers to a story that was slowly quieting, not ending, just finding a rhythm again. Angela Johnson stood at her front porch, sipping cold sweet tea, watching Maya chase a paper airplane down the sidewalk. The storm had passed, but its echo lingered in subtle ways. The courthouse steps no longer felt like a battlefield. The media had moved on to new scandals, new debates. But in this neighborhood, people remembered. They nodded at Angela in the grocery line, stopped Maya to ask how school was. Some left folded notes in their mailbox, thank yous, old stories, names of others still afraid to speak. Angela returned to her night shifts. But something was different. She wasn't just the woman who cleaned offices anymore. She was someone who had spoken up. And now others looked to her. The young janitor in training asked if she'd ever been scared. Angela just smiled and said, every day, but I keep showing up. Renee Alvarez was now a liaison for the newly formed Civilian Oversight Committee. Her days were packed with town halls, training sessions, and endless document reviews, but it felt real, like building something with nails instead of tape. At one event, she spoke to a group of new recruits. You're not just protectors, she told them. You're witnesses, too, and witnesses have responsibility. Meanwhile, Evelyn Sharp had fully retired. She moved in with her sister near Asheville where the mountains helped her sleep better, but she still got letters from the quiet circle. She still got phone calls. You made a crack in the wall, one said. We're pushing it open now. Curtis Holloway had found a second wind in advocacy. He joined a nonprofit for criminal justice reform, helping formerly incarcerated men find jobs and stability. He wore a quiet circle pin on every jacket. This, he said in one speech, started with a girl brave enough to say what the adults wouldn't. As for Maya, she had changed in ways she couldn't quite name. Her sketchbooks now lived on a bookshelf by the kitchen, and one was mailed to the Civil Rights Archive in Atlanta with a note that read, "For other kids who see too much." At school, she started a lunchtime storytelling club. They didn't just draw, they talked and listened. On the first day of 5th grade, her teacher asked each student to share something they were proud of. Most kids said basketball trophies, summer trips, new shoes. Maya stood quietly and said, "I helped people see something they were ignoring." No one laughed. No one teased. One boy clapped. And then another joined. That weekend, Angela and Maya visited the park where it all started, where they'd walked home that night, where they heard the struggle and saw the flashing lights. It looked different now, brighter somehow, or maybe just open. Maya brought her notebook and sat on a bench, sketching trees and shadows and a figure in the distance, half cop, half question mark. Angela sat beside her. "You okay, baby?" Maya nodded. "I think I want to tell stories when I grow up." Angela smiled. "You already do." They sat in silence for a long while, broken only by birds and the distant hum of city life returning to normal. Back at home that night, Mia turned on the radio. The familiar host's voice crackled through the speakers. Tonight's story comes from Charlotte, where accountability sparked from a child's voice. But this chapter isn't just about justice. It's about what happens when the cameras leave, when the courtroom's empty, and people still show up. Angela paused in the kitchen, a dish in hand, listening. Because the truth doesn't just break things, the host continued. Sometimes it rebuilds. Who? Maya smiled. She opened her notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and titled it, "Ordinary is Different Now." And in a town that once whispered away its problems, people were speaking again. Some loud, some quiet, but all real. If this chapter reminded you that ordinary people carry extraordinary truth, like to let Maya's light travel a little further, and tell us where you're listening from, because the next voice to break the silence might be in your neighborhood or your house or sitting quietly in the back of your classroom, drawing the truth. Autumn arrived in Charlotte quietly, leaves drifting down like burnt orange snowflakes. Maya and Angela walked hand in hand through their neighborhood, their breaths visible in the cool air. The world felt both vast and intimately small, a place full of possibility, fragile yet hopeful. It was the day of the city's first Voices of Courage event, hosted at Dawson's Market Community Plaza. A tented stage stood at the center, framed with local artwork, banners reading, "Speak, Listen, Heal." "We invited families, artists, activists, ordinary folks," said Renee Alvarez, stepping up to the mic. Her voice carried calm authority. "This isn't just about the past. It's about building culture for tomorrow." Curtis Holloway followed Renee. He stood tall in a quiet circle pin, speaking to a crowd of hundreds, some seated, others milling by booths. "My life changed when someone believed me," he said. "But that belief happened because a little girl named Maya nodded and said, 'I saw it.' That changed everything." Applause swept through the plaza. Angela stood watching from the edge, trying not to cry as she saw her daughter light up at the recognition. The art display included Maya's drawing notebook sketches, now professionally framed. One caught Angela's eye, rows of doors opening. Behind each door, a different person stepping forward, some tall, some small, each carrying the weight of a story. As the crowd dispersed, a woman approached Angela. She held a folding chair and offered it. "You have every right to rest," she said softly. Angela accepted the chair. When Maya ran off to join other children in a storytelling circle, the woman stayed. "You're angry, but you're kind," she began. "I was there. My son was stopped by Briggs that night. He's here somewhere." She wiped tears. "But because of you and Maya, he's not afraid to find his voice again." Angela trembled, nodded. That was the plan. Meanwhile, volunteer attorneys set up a pro bono clinic at the plaza. People brought sealed complaint forms, missing files, the worn pages of memory. They sat with lawyers who wrote statements, collected affidavits, and offered legal referrals. The quiet circle booth overflowed with new names and faces from every corner of the city. Renee walked past, watching people line up. She saw Evelyn across the field, smiling with a group of retirees sorting documents into archival boxes. Even at 60-something, Evelyn moved with purpose, proud for once, not fearful. A journalist approached Angela for a quote. She hesitated before speaking. "This isn't about me," she said. "This is about those who still can't. This is for them." Her voice broke, but her gaze was steady. Then she turned and saw Maya stepping behind the microphone stand on the small stage. The organizers had invited her to say a few words. She cleared her throat, chestnut braids brushing her shoulders. "My name is Maya," she began. "If I hadn't spoken that day, my mom might still be in a prison cell. If she hadn't shown up, no one would have believed him or Evelyn or Curtis or Renee." She looked out over faces filled with empathy. "Your voice matters, even if you think it's the quietest." All at once, dozens of people lifted bright paper leaves and stuck them on a community tree of voices. Each leaf carried names like Jennifer Carter, 2017, Marcus Lee, 2019, Sharon Willis, 2023. A visual archive of stolen visibility. The sky darkened gently as lanterns lit around the plaza. Live music drifted from a corner stage where local school children performed. But everyone's focus stayed on that tree. A simple oak painted on canvas with real branches glued on. It became a symbol. Each voice a leaf. Each leaf essential. As dusk turned to night, Angela found herself seated next to Evelyn, who whispered, "Look what you all did." Evelyn's eyes shone. For the first time in decades, she felt part of something unfolding. Not filing things away, but uplifting them. "I never thought anyone would care." "You did more than care," Angela replied. "You gathered them." Curtis joined them with mugs of cider. They passed one to Angela, who stood, raising it in tribute to Maya. To the girl who said, "I saw it," he said. And to everyone who showed up after she did, there was no clinking of glasses, no ritual, just quiet acknowledgement of everything built on truth. A legacy unfolding in real time. That night, Maya drifted to sleep early in her grandmother's guest room. Before she did, she scribbled one more line in her notebook. "A voice isn't born once. It reverberates and echoes. This is mine." And in homes across Charlotte, radios and podcasts replayed her words, not as a one-time story, but as an enduring echo. Your voice matters. Even if you think it's the quietest. The year turned. Winter came and went. Charlotte streets bloomed into spring again, the trees returning to life with a quiet resolve. Like they too remembered everything the city had endured. And in the home of Angela and Maya Johnson, things were not the same. They were stronger. On a bright morning in April, Angela stood in front of the city council, not as a witness, not as a victim, but as a keynote speaker. The occasion was the launch of the city's new Community Integrity Commission, a citizen-led watchdog panel with subpoena power and quarterly public reporting. It was real. It had taken more than a year to build. And it stood because people didn't let the dust settle back over the truth. Angela's voice didn't shake this time. This commission exists because a little girl trusted her eyes. Because neighbors came forward. Because silence lost. She paused, looking out at the diverse audience. This isn't just oversight. It's ownership. We own our justice now. In the back row, Maya sat with Miss Callahan, her old teacher. She watched her mother and beamed, holding a copy of the city's new youth publication, Voices, from the next bench. The first edition featured stories written and drawn by students, curated by Maya and her classmates. It had sold out at the local library. Later that evening, Angela and Maya returned home. Their kitchen still had chipped paint and the hum of a slightly too loud fridge, but it felt like the center of something bigger now. Angela hung a newspaper clipping on the fridge. Justice by persistence, a community turns the tide. As they ate dinner, chicken pot pie and green beans, Angela's favorite comfort combo, Maya asked, "Do you think people in other cities are listening?" Angela smiled. They are. Some are even calling. Evelyn told me there's a town in Michigan asking how to start their own quiet circle and one in New Orleans and another in Arizona. Maya leaned back, nodding slowly. I drew something for them. She pulled out a folded paper. It was a drawing of a ripple on a lake, each circle growing wider. In the center was a single voice bubble, tiny but sending waves. Beneath it, she'd written, "Every echo started with a whisper." Angela stared at it for a long time. We should send that to every quiet circle. As a kind of badge, that weekend, the city held its second Voices of Courage event. It was bigger than before, but still personal. People gathered not out of protest, but celebration. The mayor attended. The police chief gave remarks, but no one was the star. The event belonged to everyone. Curtis Holloway hosted a workshop on restorative justice. Renee Alvarez led a Q&A about internal reforms now underway within the department. Evelyn, though retired, returned to speak on the value of preserving truth, and she was greeted like an old friend. Maya stood beside a new installation, The Wall of Echoes. It held testimonies, sketches, poems, even one-liner snippets of people's bravery. Each laminated quote fluttered in the spring wind. One read, "I was scared, but I stood up anyway." Another said, "Truth doesn't ask for permission." Angela approached the wall with a marker and added her own. "My daughter gave me back my voice." In the weeks that followed, the story began appearing in podcasts, on public radio, in classroom curriculums, but not as a spectacle. Instead, as a template. Community leaders across the country reached out asking how Charlotte had done it. Maya and Angela were interviewed by a podcast in Boston. A teacher from Oakland asked for permission to share Mia's drawings in her art justice class. One Sunday afternoon, Maya received a package from a girl in Minnesota. Inside were sketches, hands holding signs, eyes watching from windows, a courtroom with children in the gallery. There was a note. "I didn't know I could say something until I read about you." Maya cried quietly, then wrote back. Her letter ended with, "You're not just watching. You're already part of it." In early May, Angela returned to the courthouse, and not for a trial, but to teach a workshop. The court had invited her to train staff on community perspective and the importance of procedural respect. She wore her old work shoes, out of principle. Inside the halls that once echoed with fear and injustice, she walked tall. And when she saw a janitor wiping the floors, she stopped to say thank you. That evening, Maya sat at her bedroom desk sketching again. This time, it wasn't courtrooms or protesters. It was a neighborhood block party. Children with kites. An old man telling stories. A woman in an apron handing out lemonade. Underneath she wrote, "Justice is what we live, not just what we fight for." Angela walked in, saw the drawing, and said, "That looks like home." "It is," Maya said, "a better version." Ugh. The final page of her notebook now had a single sentence centered in bold pencil strokes. "We cracked the wall. Now we plant something in the light." If this story gave you hope, share it with someone you believe still whispers. Like this chapter and tell us where you're listening from, because the echo of truth doesn't stop when the story ends. It begins again with you. This story reminds us that courage doesn't always roar. It often begins as a whisper. Through the eyes of a child and the quiet persistence of everyday people, we see how truth, once spoken, can ripple through silence and reshape a community. It teaches us that justice is not a distant concept. It is something we live, protect, and pass down. And perhaps most importantly, it shows that no voice is too small when it stands for what is right, only on BUP Stories.